Hello, everyone. It's Kate Stillman with the Well Pro Show. I'm here with Mitchell Osmond, and his website is dadnationco.com. And Mitchell is really working with men who are ready to uplevel their relationships, their body, their wealth gap, their overall experience. And we're going to just do a deep dive in. So I want to start with your story, Mitchell. So you were from your website. I can read right there. I can see the before after pictures. And anyone who's curious about those, go to dadnationco.com. 50 pounds overweight, drowning in six figures of debt, on the brink of divorce, and wondering how you got there. And then you've rebuilt your body, your mind, your marriage, and your financial future. So walk us a bit into like what happened for you and why you're called to bring other men through that process of awakening and through to the other side.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. And thank you for asking, because I think it's such a great place to start, because I found myself, in the rock bottom of rock bottoms, and to give a little bit of a context, I grew up in a dysfunctional home. As a young boy, always sort of looking for the attention of his father, and my father was an alcoholic, and grew up with a lot of drugs and crime and abuse in the home, and so really didn't do the work that was required to heal from a lot of those childhood wounds, and found myself married, as a young man, and about 3 years in, it kind of all hit the fan, so to speak. What I didn't realize was that a lot of these unhealed wounds began to bleed into my marriage. And like you said, I found, I was let go of a leadership position I was in, which I'd always been in positions of leadership. And then I found myself 60 pounds overweight, $100,000 in debt, and just medicating with drugs and alcohol every day, trying to cope. And now, I was in this place where I was dangerously close to divorce. Me and my wife were using that word regularly. And I feel like we were maybe one fight away. And it all started because I brought up talking about raising a family, and it was met with, there's no way that I would bring a kid into this relationship. And I was like, that was always a passion of mine, because I always wanted to sort of reset, give my future kids the life that I didn't have growing up. And so I was met with this reality of like, my goodness, this is much worse than what I thought it was. And the next point, that was a big turning point for me, because I realized it was this awakening moment of like, I got all my life figured out on the outside. Everyone's on the outside looking in, thinks this is perfect, but I'm seconds away from losing everything. And 7 days later, it was legit 1 week later, I was invited to sing at the funeral of this wealthy man. He was a philanthropist. It's about a couple thousand people there. And as I was getting ready to sing the last song, I overheard the minister ask the congregation, after talking about all the things this philanthropist had done and the ways he'd helped the community, he said, "Are you living a life worthy of imitation? Like, if you were to die today, would you be proud of the legacy that you left?" And Kate, man, when I heard that question, it shook me, because all I could think was, if this were my funeral, nobody would be saying, I want to model the marriage he had. I want to model the health he had. I want to model the, finances he had or whatever. They would probably say, man, he had a hard life and it ended too soon, And so that day I went home and I made a commitment, to go all in and to not make more excuses, to do whatever I needed to do in order to become the man and husband that I needed to be for my wife, and hopefully the father that I would be to some children one day. And so I have a picture actually of it. The next day, it was like very cold out. It was a blizzard. And I was like, you know what? I made a promise. I'm going to keep it. And I tried to go for a run, and I was wrapped up. It was icy and snowy. I made it about 500 meters and puked my guts up and came back in. But that was the start, I brought in about 5 men around me who, like, my ceiling was their floor. You know what I mean? It's like they were living where I wanted to go. These guys had great marriages. They were in great shape, big businesses, all those different things. And they surrounded me and held me to the standard I said I wanted for myself. And then within 18 months, completely paid off, that $100,000 of debt, restored our marriage, lost the 60 pounds, and was finally free of distractions and substances. And that was kind of the journey. And then I began to help friends of mine, buddies who were feeling disconnected from their wives or like who were in debt. And I made budgets, spreadsheets for people. I went to the gym with them, created meal plans, and helped a bunch of my friends lose weight. And I just saw some pretty crazy results. And then one of my mentors said to me, and if you really want to have an impact, then you need to do something about this and tell the world your story. And so that's why I started the Dad Nation podcast. And then within 6 months or so, it became a globally top rated podcast in the top 5%. And which was great, was affirmation that there's a lot of men who maybe need to hear this. And then 6 months into that, I had a lot of men reaching out across the world saying, would you help me, with these things? And so I decided to launch my own coaching practice. And that's what I do today, Kate, is I heard Ed Milet say this a little while ago on his podcast, but he said, you are the most qualified to help the person you used to be. Mm-hmm. And I'm such a huge fan of that. And that's what I do today. I help high-performing men or career-driven men reclaim their home, their health, and their happiness without sacrificing the career success. And that was me. I was in a position of leadership. All that stuff made sense. But my front life, my outside, my professional life was thriving, but my inner life was quite struggling. So that's what I do today. And that's how I got here.
Yeah. And so with the coaching, is it more one-on-one or more group or both?
Yeah, I do mostly group coaching. It's called the High Performance Husband Accelerator. It's a 12-month program that men can come in, and there's a whole course that they work through. We have calls and we have all that stuff, but we do in-person retreats and masterminds. But for the right person, I'll do a one-to-one, who has a certain specific need or the means to invest in that kind of way. But yeah, I definitely do two of those things for sure.
Yeah, so that's basically what we teach, what we guide wellness pros to do in Wellness Pro Academy is to go to the club membership, the annual recurring revenue membership model that's based on community of becoming and belonging. People come and can be financially invested in their future self and with other people that are financially invested, with a leader who has walked the path, who's been through that journey and has been able to identify what are the core competencies to get to where we want to go, build the curriculum, do the life coaching, and really hold the members in that really potentized space of transformation. So it's great to connect it because the space is so much more populated by women. The coaching space and wellness and in relationship there's just so many more women. I'm curious for the men who, and part of the reason we wanted to have you on the show, we do get a ton of solicitations, is because of you representing the guys sticking up for the dads out there. And that the dads really, what we find in Club Thrive, where we model the way on the business model, is that a lot of women are wanting to send their husbands somewhere, their partners somewhere, in order to take their body up a notch, or in order to deepen their relationship potential, or become better parents, or improve their fathering skills, or become a better grown son to their fathers. And there's just so much development and evolution that's been accelerated by women in the last 20, 30 years in the self-help, self-growth, personal investment category, that we just are not seeing that in the same numbers in men. And so I'm kind of curious, when people find out about you, is it more through their girlfriends, wives, partners, or is it more they're actually seeking?
So I have three different types of people who come to me, right? The first is the guy who, I would say, when it comes to that hierarchy of competence, there's unconsciously incompetent, whereas you don't know what you don't know. And the next level is consciously incompetent, where something happens that makes you aware that there's a lot that you don't know. So one type of guy that comes to me is the guy that wakes up and his wife is packing her bags, or he gets a bad health diagnosis, or, he hits burnout, or, there's some sort of traumatic event that shakes him and is like, man, I need to change my ways, and that was ultimately where I got. I was playing guitar, staring at the casket of another man, and I was faced with my legacy. And I had that moment of, what's the point in all this career and all this leadership and influence if I'm going to be sitting around the Christmas tree alone this year? That was me. And so that's
So did you look, or did someone recommend a mentor to you?
No, I just did it all organically. Just reached out to those 5 guys, and then they showed me how the importance of coaching and mentorship and all that stuff.
Okay.
So the first guy is that guy who has had some sort of event that happened. The second person is a lot of the men who listen to the podcast who are just living at a high level, and they want to keep it all tuned in. It's the guys who the rest of the world would say don't need a coach. It's the people who are aware and want to keep their skills sharp. The third person is like what you said, is the person who gets sent to me by their wife, right? Because here's the crazy thing. My Instagram, for example, I don't know, I got 20,000 followers or so. But when you look at my audience, it started out to be mostly men. Now it's over half women. And what they'll do is they're drawn to the content and they send the posts to their husbands, right? Hey, check this guy out, check this guy out. He gets me, he understands me.
Yeah.
And so they start following me, and then they connect with me and be like, hey, my wife told me to check you out, blah, 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 blah. Things have been tough at home. Can we talk? And so it's really interesting. A lot of my clients have actually come through their wives.
Yeah,
right?
I would think so. I mean,
Which
that's
I would have never thought that when I started out.
Yeah, I mean, because I coach wellness pros in business, and with the men, I'm like, it's pretty easy. All you need is the wife's referral. Like that your target client is actually the wife, who's just had it up to here and is frustrated with your eating habits, is frustrated with your relational, skills. Is like target her and you'll get him. It's just faster path, especially if things are dicey, right? If things are. So let's just talk a little bit about like why this tends to be true for men, whereas like women often are seeking their own personal and self-development. I do see it with men at like the men that I meet in business at like much higher levels in business usually have a coach, a mentor, and have for most of their career lives. But there's this whole like middle gap of people that are under that like top tier that just that are trying to figure it out all by themselves and like wondering why their wife is complaining or wonder why they just got, released from a job when they didn't realize that they were even, in jeopardy of that. When all of a sudden they're just like, how did I actually get this heavy, or how did I get so disconnected from my child? Like what happened in my life? Do you want to just talk about like why is that happening? Or if we just look at the past, few decades, while like women have been like investing in themselves very heavily, like paying out of pocket, going to yoga class, going to Pilates, finding a coach, joining a mastermind group. Why haven't we seen that in the same at the same rate with the men of their same socioeconomic category?
That's a great question, and it took me a long time to sort of process through and think about that. And after coaching so many men, I'm pretty clear as to why that is. Probably the number one reason is, and this is a generalization. This is not true for all men. But the vast majority of men are just, they don't have the same amount of emotional intelligence as what women have. And that's by design, actually. We're stronger in other areas. So don't get me wrong. Don't hear me say that there's a weakness. We're strong in other areas. But, for example, 70% of the divorces in the U.S. today are initiated by the women. Right? Yeah. In situations where the wife is a high earner or has a high education, that number actually jumps to 9 out of 10. 90% of divorces are initiated by women. And here's the crazy thing. If you dig into those statistics, 80% of the time, the main reason cited for the divorce is a lack of emotional connection to her partner. Right? So we have a very interesting data point that is very, very important to observe. 80% of the 90% of marriages that end, the reason why is because of a man's inability to connect with his wife on an emotional level. So whether we see that on an emotional level in relationships, intimate relationships, or relationships with our children, or relationships in the workplace, we don't necessarily pick up on some of those nuances where women do. We don't pick up on the internal tension, the anxiety, the weight that we carry like women do, because we just push through. So that's number one, is we don't necessarily have that same intuition, that same awareness that sets off an alarm that says, I should invest in someone to help me get to the next level. The second reason, which I think is really closely connected to this, is in general, as a society, men are typically valued by what they can do, what they can provide, what they can build, the results, right? Someone said to me a little while ago, he said that the masculine is about doing and the feminine is about being, and I thought that was quite interesting. And so men, because of the fact that we are, we take a lot of pride in what we can do, what we can produce, how we perform, all those different things. At the end of the day, I think if men reach out to other men, they're afraid that the pride gets in the way because they're afraid that they're going to be perceived as weak or they can't perform like other men, right? And so, if he thinks, for example, for men, the two biggest needs a man has is to be respected and to be competent, to feel respected and to feel competent. Those are the two things. And you ask a man you ask a room of 500 men to put up their hand, would you rather hear the words, I love you or I respect you? 99% of the room is going to raise their hand when you say, I respect you. And that's a crazy thing that a lot of even women don't necessarily understand, is that they crave respect more than they crave love.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so when they are faced with this desire to reach out,
Mm-hmm.
they feel like they're going to be perceived as weak, which then will relate to or will then translate to disrespect. Well, he's not going to respect me if he thinks I'm weak, so therefore I can't reach out and look for the help. When in reality, that couldn't be further from the truth. And so this is why we're like lone wolves, right? And it's like there's a certain nobility in that. I'm going to put my head down and I'm going to grind, and when I bring my head up, y'all will know. And it's like, well, you know what? The strong wolf builds packs. The lone wolf dies alone. It's true. We know that. And so I think those are a couple reasons why men don't necessarily take the steps that they should. And unfortunately, why it gets to a point where there's some sort of traumatic event where then they reach out. But unfortunately, then it's really late in the game, and you got to do a lot of work to kind of get back to where you wanted it to be, especially in the context of relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, part of what where I want to go next is like it's like how to invest. Like people don't in general learn how to invest for the future they want to experience, right? And so they don't necessarily know how to even like project a vision of who they want to be in the future, 10 years out, and what they want in terms of, what to feel like, to look like, to be earning at, to how to be contributing to community, to have kind of relationships they want to have with their children, with their aging parents, with their friends, their community, their neighbors, like all of that. And yet in coaching, that's largely what we do is like, let's set a vision for your future. Like, let's get into the creative possibility and not the reactive possibility. And then let's use strategy to get there. And let's have community that's also doing the same thing so that you have reinforcement. So you don't feel like you're actually going in alone. You don't feel like a victim, but we're all in it together. And this is proven time and again to lead to absolutely life-changing, remarkable results. And as people who run coaching companies, like we're both really familiar with that part of the process. And then in that process, there's often what I notice in my sales cycle is people that have already invested in masterminds, they know the value of investing in masterminds. People who haven't, they don't. And so the biggest barrier to entry that I really see is like that first time, like that first investment in a coach. Right? Like that first investment in a coaching group, in a mastermind group, in a group of aligned individuals where I do strongly believe, and there is good data, and like you have to pay attention. Like you have to actually be invested to the end result for you to show up for your future self, because your current self isn't actually who you want to be forever. And so with that, I'm just curious for you, what you are finding, and I'd like this to be kind of like a data-driven question of like, what are you finding for men who are investing in themselves for the first time? In terms of their objections or the new ways that they need to actually make financial decisions for themselves in order to become the person they want to become.
You're asking what are the objections I usually hear? Is that kind of what you're asking?
And what are the beliefs they need to overcome in the sales process if they have no pride? Because we obviously there's this like, well, I can figure it out for myself. Information's free on YouTube. Right? There's all these again potential objections. Because what I see is like once a person has done it and invested in themselves, it's much easier for them to continue to invest in themselves.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the big objection I think that I've experienced is ego, right, for men. And then so what happens is, for example, we'll get on a call and we'll talk about, what's going on, and they'll tell me about, how their wife said that if things don't change, they're going to get a divorce, or the doctor said if you don't change the way you're eating, you're going to have a heart attack, And it starts out with this like desperation, I got this thing, I got this conversation with my wife, and then we talk about it, what he's tried. It's like, well, I've tried this, therapy, or I've tried hiring a trainer, I've tried blah, 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 and then when we talk about the investment, then the brakes get put on, right? And it's like, well, you know this. And then the conversation goes to, well, I could probably just figure it out on my own, right? And so the ego comes into it. It's like, well, I just haven't tried, hard enough, right? And so to which I'll usually say, so tell me, how's that working for you? Like the past, I mean, we, this, I know this, Kate, like 95% of the decisions we make every single day are the same decisions we made yesterday and the day before that. The vast majority of our lives are lived on autopilot, and that's what a great coach does. That's what a great community does, is it puts your feet to the fire, and shows you, and you see what everyone else is doing, and it shows you the results are possible for yourself. But a lot of guys kind of get a little bit inflated, and they get a little bit like, no, I can do this. I got this, And so that's the big thing I would see. And then the price thing for sure is the price objection is the next thing. To which, I'll often say like, yeah, I get it. 4 figures, whatever you're charging is a bit of an investment. But so is, the average divorce in the United States costs at least $15,000 just for the lawyers alone. Then there's losing half of your net worth, which could be, a lot of my high profile clients are like millionaires. So you're looking at least $1 million lost, not to talk about the emotional trauma on your children, yourself, your ex-wife, all those things. So when we're talking about cost, it's like, well, what costs more to you, or dying at 55 instead of 85 and walking your daughter down the aisle because you didn't have the humility to hire someone to help you break that emotional bond you have with eating, things like that, right? So in my experience with men, I have to decide when I get on a call, is this guy super assertive? Is he like an alpha type guy? Because if that's the case, I have to match that energy and actually be a little bit assertive and confrontational, because if I don't, he won't respect me, right? And I actually have to press and ask some of those questions like, hey, how's that been working for you? Because once he's faced with the truth, therapy didn't work, or just like trying to do it on your own, or talking to your buddy going for beers didn't work, or your free church community didn't work, fill in the blank. So what is it going to take? But if it's a person who's a little bit more maybe gentle or a little bit more soft or whatever the case is, you have to approach them with humility or, understanding and empathy, right? And really kind of connect with them on that level. But a lot of times my clients are, those people who've seen professional success, right? And so those guys are fairly assertive, fairly straightforward. And so you kind of have to spit the facts back at them, right? And remind them of the situation they're in. Does that make sense?
Yep. And I'm also wondering, how much do they need to know that other successful men who have, a body that they're proud of, that have a relationship that they're respected in, that have a job where they're getting promotions, that have invested in coaching? Like, how much is it just an educational piece that they don't know what other successful men are doing?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it, and that's where testimonials help. For sure. And that's why my website it's plastered through with testimonials of other men who've had their lives changed. And I'll do that on connection calls too. I'm like, hey man, check out Chris. This is his story. Check out Michael. He is this. Yeah. Because the common misconception is that a lot of these guys think that certain people just got it figured out and other people don't. And you know what I mean? Or they got dealt a great, hand of cards or whatever. And I'm like, literally the only difference between you and that guy is he hired a coach, or he said yes when you said no. Yeah. Or he took action when you stalled, right? Yeah. Whatever the case is. And so it's a conversation for sure, but generally speaking, a lot of guys in my experience don't know that other successful people are doing this because we don't talk about it as men. Yeah. Going back to our emotional intelligence, going back to our lack of comfortable or lack of comfortability with being vulnerable. Because we're not going to say, yeah, man, I've been seeing a therapist or I've been seeing a counselor or I've hired a coach, because we want everyone to know we were self-made. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so a lot of guys just are not open and talk about that, right? Or at least they're not talking about it in their circles, right? Yeah. Yeah. That came up. I was just in this Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business program, and one of the things that came up, and this is the state of Wyoming's first cohort. So like the state of Wyoming is a rugged individualism state, right? Like it's very big geographically, and there's not a lot of people, and you had to be tough to make it. You have to be tough to make it in Wyoming, like in a lot of different ways. The weather, the topography, the economy, it's like oil and gas driven industry, et cetera. And it was great because one of the guys at the end just stood up and he's like, the myth of rugged individualism. It's really going to keep you from your financial success in your business. And, there is, I think, a lot of indoctrinated in culture, in American culture in particular. I mean, I do see it show up in Australian culture and other cultures around the world, but there
It's very strong in American men, this whole idea of like you'll get there through going it alone and being tough. And it's like the data does not back it up. It's such an outdated belief, and it's really painful for the whole family and the structure of family when men aren't making that own personal evolution to like, how am I showing up in rugged individualism versus how am I actually showing up in being a leader, and a connected leader in community, whether that's at work, whether that's at home, or whether that's in my neighborhood. And yet when men step into that, like women just light up, like children are shown a path into leadership, communities get healthier, like job opportunities get bigger because businesses get networked, and businesses that are networked grow faster than businesses that aren't networked. Right. And it's like, there's so much of, I think, in this conversation that I'm taking away is it's really coming down to education.
Yeah. 100%. It's interesting you talk about that because, I say in the beginning and the end of every single episode on my podcast, when the dad gets better, the whole family wins. And I genuinely believe that when the dad gets better, meaning when the dad takes ownership, when the dad shows up more powerfully, when the dad loves his wife, when the dad loves his children, when his dad is sober, when the dad is clean, when the dad is focused, when his dad is healthy, when they're not obese. When he does that, the whole family wins. And the organization he works with wins. Because whether you like it or especially for children, especially for young boys, masculinity is caught, not taught. You can't teach a young boy how to be a masculine man. He has to catch it by being around other men, right? And I say to men all the time, if you got a daughter, because a lot of guys talk to me about they want to change for the kids. I said, well, listen, if you want your daughter to bring home a great man one day, you have to model that greatness for her so she can recognize it in other men when she sees it for herself, right? Like, you don't understand that you are the blueprint for these kids. Your marriage is their first classroom on relationships. You can't say one thing and do another thing. And there's something about the father and his significance in the home, both emotionally, physically, all those different things that carries significance. Like, for example, there's some statistics that are just crazy. In the U.S. today, we know that 1 in every 4 kids will be raised without a father. Here's some statistics which are crazy. 63% of youth suicides come from fatherless homes. 90% of homeless and runaway children come from fatherless homes. 85% of children with behavioral disorders come from fatherless homes. And the last one, which is crazy to me, 71% of high school dropouts come from fatherless homes. And so the reason why these statistics are important is this is the whole reason why I started this movement. Because I'm like, man, you don't understand the value and the significance you bring to your home, your relationships, your organization. But yet, now more than ever, men are checked out, they're stressed out, they're burned out. For example, the average man in the U.S. today spends over 2,000 hours per year on a screen, escaping reality. That's like 85 days, I think, if I did some calculations. Since 1995, number of men that said they had 0 close friends went from 3% to 15%. And it's even higher now. So a lot of men who are more medicated than ever, they're drinking more than ever, they're more isolated than ever, and they have no friends, and they're not doing anything about it because they don't feel comfortable doing it, right? And you're right, it's sad. And that's exactly why I launched this mission. Yeah.
So what advice do you have to other men who are launching their coaching businesses to help men?
Yeah. Be prepared for resistance. Be prepared to deal with the ego. Be prepared, especially if you want to work for high performers, because everyone thinks that they can fix it on their own, because that's what we do all day. Men are, we go to work. Women are too, but because of the fact that men are, the masculine are certainly driven by performance and goal-oriented and mission-driven, and we're not really emotional that way. So it's even harder to connect with our emotions on this level as well. But it's like we think we can fix everything by nature, right? Because we do it everywhere else. And so to anyone who is starting a coaching business to help men, that would be the big thing, is you have to constantly communicate the payoff. You have to constantly communicate the vision. And this is true for all coaching companies, I think. Understand, there is, to every offer, to every business, there are, the people involved, which is the coach. There are the pieces, which is, the parts of the program. There's the process, which is what they go through, and the payoff. right? But what happens, those 4 Ps, but what happens is so many guys focus on the people, the pieces, and the process, which is just the logistics.
Yeah.
And they don't ever talk about the payoff. And that's all we want, right? If I start talking to a guy about like, I'm going to help improve your mindset, what does that even mean? Like the mindset is such an ambiguous word, right? But if I say to you, I'm going to help you stop snapping at your kids, right? I'm going to help you fight less with your wife or drop 40 pounds and get a promotion at work. Okay, now we're talking about a language I can understand.
Yeah.
Get excited about that, right?
Yeah.
But if I talk about, well, you can connect on an emotional level with your wife, like, I don't know, why would I want to do that? You know? And so it's all about communicating the payoff.
Yeah.
I don't care about your fancy course. I don't care about, you know, how many years of coaching experience you have or even the curriculum or whatever. What can I get? And make it tactical, make it practical so I can like feel like I can wrap my hands around it. Because if it's not tactical, guys aren't going to want to pay attention to it. Yeah. So those are a couple of things I think about.
Yeah, I mean, the way I talk about it is more as like guiding the transformation. Like the A to B is that what you're calling the payoff is like what will change, right? Yeah. Not how will we do it, but what will actually change. So I'm curious, engagement, getting them to show up on the coaching sessions. Like what has for you, like what have been your biggest ahas, biggest learnings, and you know, how you, I mean, to me with group engagement, it's something I continually look at and want to structure as, you know, people's beliefs change, time changes, investment, how they're invested in the group and in the process. So I'm curious for you what you've learned along the way.
Yeah, that's a great question. This is great because I don't usually get these kinds of questions. I think as a coach, you can make the mistake of feeling like you got to spoon feed everyone everything all the time. You know, for me, you know, I'd show up on calls and I'd be like, man, I've got to deliver so much, and I'd overwhelm them with content. I'd overwhelm them with processes and frameworks, and they would just sit there and like take it all in, and then we get off the call. There was no ownership on their part, right? Because I just kept spoon feeding them. And they weren't engaging with me. They weren't engaging with each other. And I was like, why aren't we digging? I mean, this is good stuff. I'm like, well, of course I think it's good stuff because I wrote it, and I'm the guy who's in this all the time, right? And so what I basically decided to start doing was cut my content by like 75%, you know, and take one core thought, right? Yeah. One key framework, and then pack it full of even my own stories of what I've learned. Practice vulnerability and be honest about where I'm at and connect with them on a bro to bro level when they're like, he's been there too, he gets this. Yeah. One or two of the guys are going to have the courage then to share, and all of a sudden, boom, 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 it starts picking up like wildfire. But you will not get there if you think that you have to be the teacher. If you have to constantly spoon feed. You give one concept and then share from your own experience, level with the guys in the room. And then one or two of them will have the courage. And then, you know, but it's so hard because you feel like when you're on a call, you got to pack every space with words and content. It's like, no, let it sit for a minute. Let the guys have a moment to process. Because this isn't like a group of women. It's very different. Like they're again so emotionally aware. They're there they can't wait to share what's going on with them or what they're experiencing or what they're, you know, whatever. Men are different. Our disposition is to hold back, is to suppress, right? And so that would be the big thing that I've done was, I cut my content way down, and then I cut my own engagement down and kind of forced them to step up into it. But I modeled it by me talking about my own marriage and my own journey, which made them comfortable, right? But that's some things a lot of coaches don't want to do, because especially guy coaches, because they don't want to look like they're weak, right? Because I'm a coach, I'm not supposed to talk about my weaknesses. Otherwise, you guys won't want to pay me because it sounds like I got stuff that I'm working through. Well, yeah, that's the whole reason. If you want to build their respect and their trust, you got to be vulnerable, but so many people aren't willing to do that. Yeah. So coaching is different than teaching is, I think, the first point. And then the second point is like story with vulnerability is always essential for the group to have vulnerability. The leader has to model the way on vulnerability and personal transformation. Are you doing, I'm curious too, as far as like investing is one thing, and then digesting curriculum is another thing, like actually getting people to show up live for coaching.
Yeah, just tell me part of your journey with that, of like really getting them not just participating on calls, but like first of all, just like showing up.
Yeah, I mean, for
What do
me,
you, maybe I'll follow up too, and what do you do when they don't?
yeah, I mean, I'll often say, I'm going to be your coach, not your crutch, right? I'm not going to babysit you. You're a big boy. You paid for this. You can show up for the calls. I'm fairly hands off in that sense. I hold the guys to a high standard. Like a lot of guys will get on the call with me. They're like, well, what's your guarantee? Like, I'm not going to give you a guarantee. I can't guarantee you anything. I can't, you know what I mean? That would be foolish for me to guarantee you a certain kind of result, because I'm not in your marriage. I'm not waking up with you 6 a.m., across the world and pushing you to the gym. I'm not going to guarantee you anything. If you want a money back guarantee, well, what if I don't get the results? But that's on you, man. Like, I can share with you the same frameworks that have changed this guy's life and this guy's life and this guy's life. And then let me tell you the stories about them.
Yeah.
But I also am not going to hold your hand. So here's the framework that have helped all these men. If you apply these things, yes, you will get results when you do the work. My job is to give you the content, hold you to that, be the facilitator of this, but it's your responsibility to get the results. And no, I'm not going to give you your money back when you didn't put in the work, right? And so I'm pretty like aggressive on that side of things, because in my experience, if I'm not, and I don't make that very clear, they think that I'm going to hold their hand. And that's when coaching becomes exhausting, because you're constantly getting bombarded with texts or messages or blaming, or this isn't working and this isn't working. Well, that's because they thought from day one you were responsible for their success, but you're not, right? Yeah. You're responsible to deliver the information, facilitate the discussion, all that stuff, and continuously create great frameworks and all those things. Yeah. But at the end of the day, so for me, I get pretty good engagement because of the fact that I really push community engagement. Like when they're on the calls, we'll do breakouts and breakout discussions, small, and I continuously say, hey, this is on you. Your success is on you, not me, not that guy, not that guy. So if you don't show up, don't expect to get results. Don't be surprised, right? But hey, I'm not gonna come knocking on your door if you're not gonna be there. Yeah. And so for me, I've gotten pretty great engagement, and because I'm very assertive with them and I'm very strong with them. And that's the thing most people are afraid to do, because they think if I do that, they won't like me. And especially the case with men, men actually, the same thing that might repel or deter women actually acts as an attraction for men, because they respect a man. Men respect a man who's going to call them up, who's going to hold them to a standard, who's going to call them out, right? A lot of men do. Yeah. But a lot of us men who want to be liked because we're tribal, we don't want to get kicked out of the tribe, whatever, or I want to keep bringing clients in, and if I'm not nice, or if I push them too much, then they might leave, and I'm fragile. It's not like coach is like, I had to learn so much about that, because I was insecure and I was afraid to speak to this person and tell them what they need to hear, not tell them what they want to hear, right? So for example, I was in a situation with a client of mine a little while ago, and he was telling me about a conflict that he had with his wife, and he said something to her which was inappropriate. This guy's a multimillionaire, has a crew of like 800 guys. And I said, man, you shouldn't talk to your wife like that. But I understand why she responded to you like that. And I said, that's a dick move, right? And he was like, you can't talk to me like that. I'm like, what do you mean I can't talk to you like that? So you hired me to talk to you like that. It's my responsibility to tell you what you need to hear. You have 800 employees. Yeah. They're going to tell you what you want to hear. Yeah. That's not my job. Right. I'm going to tell you what you need to hear. And I tell you what, that's not going to be comfortable. And that's the very reason why you're here. It's my responsibility to make you uncomfortable, to hold your feet to the fire. And you're not going to like it, but you're certainly going to get a lot of results, right? But it's that kind of way of coaching that people get scared of. Right? Yeah. But it gets results.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And
for men, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah.
I can't speak for women. I have zero experience working with women. I know it wouldn't work on my wife, that's for sure.
Yeah. And I like how, just so we differentiate a few things. Like one is DIY, done with you, done for you. And the point of like, I can't do the work for you. Just one thing I would add to the guarantee is like one of the things that we often coach in Wellness Pro Academy is like, I can guarantee if you like if you follow the system, you show up the coaching, like you take the actions, your life's going to change, in unbelievable ways, because that's what happens to all of our members. And I guarantee if you don't do this, that you won't get anywhere. But yeah, in terms of the person has to walk their own path and putting that responsibility on them. I like how you're calling men up. Like there's this call up into potentiality. And I do find that works for both men and women. It's like calling people to their higher potential is very underdone, especially in this like very cradled childhood that a lot of, the sort of helicopter parents are perpetuating, where it's like we know that like letting people fail, but calling them to their potential has been pretty effective over time, and being able to support and guide that journey is essential then if we're calling them up to it.
Mm-hmm. And I think we crave it. I think it's I've never experienced such of this weird juxtaposition of like guys are simultaneously so uncomfortable, and yet we get off calls and they'll email me like, man, thank you so much for that. That was the highlight of my day. And meanwhile, I was thinking the whole time I'm going to reach to the screen and punch me in the face. You know what I mean? But it's like, but we live in this fake world where everything is fake. Go on Instagram, go on Facebook, right? No one has real, candid conversations anymore. And that's why we find ourselves in this situation. And we just want to be comfortable. And people also, I said this to a client a couple of days ago, I'm like, listen, man, I get it. You want to be comfortable, right? And you're surrounding yourself by people who make you comfortable. And those people are only going to tell you what you want to hear because they want to be comfortable. Yeah. Everyone's in this society that's obsessed with comfort and immediate gratification. Yeah. And that's the very problem. And so let's get a little bit uncomfortable. Right. Yeah.
There's a saying in enlightenment, if you're not uncomfortable, you're probably not evolving.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Learning's uncomfortable, growing's uncomfortable, because you're going into spaces that are unfamiliar to the ego, right? We're going beyond where we've been, stepping across the liminal into potentiality. And doing that together is so much faster and more fun and more effective. Well, so I'm really, go ahead.
Well, just one quick thing. I say this to guys all the time. I'm like, listen, being overweight is hard, but being in great shape is also really hard. Working a 9-to-5 is hard. Being an entrepreneur is really hard. Having a great marriage is really hard. Going through divorce is really hard. Yeah. Literally nothing, and this resonates with a lot of guys too. It's like nothing is going to be easy. Nothing worth having is going to be easy. The point is not to choose easy. The point is to find the difficult thing, the hard thing that you're most passionate about. Choose it and go for it no matter what, because spoiler alert, none of it is easy.
Yeah.
And perhaps that's the whole point.
Yeah. I mean, it's so much. My background's from yoga and Ayurvedic medicine, and it's it's very deep spiritual tradition. It's like very clear on initiations. I mean, it's in every culture that like the way to the next level. Like most people aren't going to come. Most people aren't going to go. The way is challenging, right? The passages are narrow. It's an eye of the needle, right? And on the other side, the air is thinner and the crowd is thinner. But is it the crowd you want to be with? Right.
100%.
Is it Mitchell? Again, pointing people to dadnationco.com. I know you have like a little low barrier to entryway for people to get a sense of what it is that you do. Do you want to tell people about that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's a framework that I developed for all of my one-to-one clients, and it's something that resonated with them so deeply. I decided to make it available for the public, but it's just called the Spark Starter Kit. And I've designed it for high-performing individuals who a lot, like I said, a lot of my clients are business leaders, entrepreneurs who don't have a lot of time to maybe thinking about date nights, or when their wife sends them a big text message, they're like, how do I respond to this, or how do I make up after a fight, or how do I encourage her without sounding too soft? All these things, right? We wrestle with our words. And so I created the Spark Starter Kit is essentially your romance on autopilot for an entire year. And so inside the kit is 365 text messages that are pre-written, and all you have to do is copy, paste, and personalize them for your relationship, your situation. So it's like legitimately, and for every category, whether you want to repair and reconnect, or you want to turn up the heat and prepare for a date night, if you want to, whatever. There's 52 date night blueprints, so you don't have to think about date night. All you got to do is show up and be the hero. And then there's 100 conversation starters, and this goes back to our emotional awareness. And a woman's greatest need is to connect emotionally, and this is where we struggle the most. And so these conversation starters are specifically designed to engage your partner in a way that unravels them emotionally and makes them feel more connected to you. And the last thing is a romance reset. It's just a 3-module mini course. If you feel like you're in a situation where your marriage is kind of boring, you feel like your roommate's sharing a mortgage, this romance reset is what it's called. And it's a course to literally just do that and to get the fire back and to get that reconnection. So the whole thing is cheaper than a bouquet of flowers, which, let's be real, are going to die within a week. So I think it's like $17 right now. So if you go to sparkstarterkit.com, you can pick it up, or you can put it in the show notes if you want.
Yeah, we definitely will. Awesome. Yeah, I'm sure in Club Thrive, there's a lot of women that will send this to their partners and their husbands. And, if there are men out there listening and want to really get the coaching model, just go to wellnesspro.academy and check out Launchpad, and we'll figure out the unique club that you are born to lead. Mitchell, it's just been a blast, and I really appreciate the depth of your experience and the development of your club, your company, your coaching. Yeah, way to go, man.
Thank you, Kate. I really appreciate that. And it's been a pleasure to speak with you today, and I just hope that this conversation resonates with your listeners, and that's just all I'm here to do is just serve other people, serve other couples, other men, other women, the most powerful way I know how. So I'm just glad to be here.
All right, you guys. Hello, listeners. So I have created for the Wellness Pros out there who listen to this show, the Wellness Pro Launchpad, and I'll get you in for free. Just go to wellnesspro.academy /Launchpad, LAUNCHPAD, Launchpad, and then just fill out the form, and we'll get you right into this school classroom in here. And in the Launchpad, it's really cool. Like, you get to see yourself as the hero in the path of the Wellness Pro, and then your client's transformation and A to B, and your vibe and your brand, your investment story, and design the journey for your clients, patients, or students, and then how to price from results. So these lessons are super short. They're each about 10 minutes, and you'll have a reframe on how to launch and scale the next phase of your wellness career. So wellnesspro.academy /Launchpad. And then and on the inside, if you really want to launch, you can, like, your next phase of growth as a wellness pro, then you can talk to me. See you soon.